Good morning. It is so good to be together. I am glad that you are here this morning. In this Christmas season, it is a season of generosity, and so there is lots of ways to respond. And it is a season where we remember God's generosity for us, and so it is a great season to respond in generosity. And so the Hope Tree is a great way to do that. And also for a church, it's an important season for us. So if you call this your church home, I want to invite you to consider what it is for you to participate and join us in that through your giving as well. And for some of you, that's something you've tried. And so for some of you, you've never tried it. And I want to encourage you, this is a great season to begin to try it because it will help you find Christmas. I know you don't believe me. It will help you find Christmas this season if you respond in generosity. And for those of you that have tried it once, maybe I want to invite you to try it a second time or make it a regular part of how you respond to God in this season. So those tags are out there, great way for us to care about the community, but also a way for us to respond and be a part of helping to make Ranch Church what it is. And so I want to invite you into that. Also, it's Christmas coming, and we've got Christmas Eve services. You guys know what times we're meeting? 2, 4, and 11. That's right. Midnight Mass for those of you that like it, or midnight service for those of you that like it. We'll be here at 11 o'clock, going to midnight to say Merry Christmas. But we also have 2 o'clock service and a 4 o'clock service. Why? Because I want you to have as many opportunities to invite your friends to come and hear about the truth of Christmas and experience the truth of Christmas. Last Tuesday, we got together, a group of us from the church, many of you were there, and we went, we've got door hangers for you out at the Connect table, but we got together at In-N-Out and then just canvassed neighborhoods to invite our friends, neighbors, people we don't know to come and experience the truth of Christmas. Got a little photo. We had a lot of fun. We've got those for you, though. You don't have to do it on that Tuesday. You can grab a stack of them, go hit your neighbors, maybe talk to them about Christmas. If they don't have a church, we'd love for them to come and experience that truth here. So that is for you. It was a lot of fun. Yeah? All right, in your bulletin, you've got your outline. Why don't you go ahead and pull that out? We are in a series called Hope is Here. What do you want this Christmas, right? To understand what hope is and to live into it. And so we are talking about hope, the hope that comes in Christmas. And this morning we're talking about how hope is a person. Question for you. How many of you like watching Christmas movies during the Christmas season? Yeah. How many of you like the classic, old ones, black and white style, White Christmas? Yeah, there you go. How many of you like the new ones? Elf, those are your favorite. How many of you are all about the Hallmark Christmas? How many of you don't want to admit that you're all about the Hallmark? Oh, yeah, all the ladies. It's the Hallmark Christmas. My house, we kind of do them all. We have the classic, my kids make a list, and it's like, okay, which ones are we going to hit, rewatch? Are there any new ones we need to see? And we watch the Christmas. Anytime all the kids are home, we try to put on a Christmas movie. One of the things I love to do when I watch Christmas is, actually I do this when I watch any movies, is to watch the story and to find out what is the main character or main characters hoping for. Where do they think that their rescue is going to come from? Where do they think that their fulfillment's going to come from? Because especially if you watch the Hallmark ones, what you will see is somebody that finds them in a place where they're a little lost or they're confused. They're in a transition and they don't know what the future holds. And so they're helping to kind of experience some life in the world. And largely what you find, and this is just true in movies, in our culture, is that the rescue, the truth that they are looking for is usually found in some sort of inner genius they had inside of them all along and they just need to discover it. That, or it's this heroic living out of who they actually are. So it's this moment where they go, this is who I really am, and I'm going to live that out loud, and that is where hope comes from. That is where rescue is going to come from, and it's because our culture is dominated by this sense of expressive individualism, and so it's really been inside me all along. You know what I'm talking about. You see it in the stories, and if you watch closely, you see it. Or if I just live out of who I am, that is where life is found, and so they try to live that out. But what I love about Christmas is more and more as you watch the stories, it isn't just that they'd find it in themselves, but there is also this encounter from outside. That an outside force or magic or maybe Santa Claus is going to show up and bring kind of rescue into the world. Now, our world muddles it, and I love to watch how they muddle it. I even watched a Charles Dickens Christmas story. One of the newer Christmas stories, an animated one, which is all about rescue from outside, right? He is a sad, miserable, grinchy living in isolation and angry at the world. And it is not until these forces, these three spirits come and impress on his life that he can find life and truth and the real meaning of Christmas and the generosity that comes with it. But I watched this animated one, and they're subtly hinting at this. Oh, it really was in him all along, and he knew about it. And here's my point. I digress. As you watch Christmas stories, over and again, more and more, you get this sense of there has to be some force from outside that comes in and impresses on their lives for them to find truth. And the real story of Christmas is exactly that. Humanity has found itself in the darkness. Humanity has found itself lost and in need, and God shows up. That God comes into the world, a world that needs rescue, and he brings rescue. And so this morning, we're going to look at the story of Christmas out of John, and we're going to see how John declares how God sees a world in need and doesn't just leave it there, and people in need that need a rescue, that need hope, that need salvation, and God shows up to bring rescue. So let's look at in the very person of Jesus. So if you got your Bibles, turn to John chapter 1. And if you don't have your Bibles, it's on the screens or it's on your outlines as well. And I've got questions and fill-ins for you. Are you ready? Let's look at God's word this morning. This is how John tells the story. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. On your outlines, I've got it. We're going to jump down to the next. I've skipped twice as I read through this, and all I am skipping is the story about John the Baptist. And basically, this is what it says. Are you ready? This is what you're missing. John showed up to testify to this. John was not this. Okay, got it? Here we go. He came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but the birth that comes from God. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father and the Son. From his abundance we have all received gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us. This is the word of the Lord. And so the question as we begin, we're looking for hope this morning. And what John is declaring to us is that hope has showed up. That we needed rescue, not something that we could do or be within us, but that we actually needed help from outside. We were such in a predicament. And God shows up in a person. And so this morning we see that hope is a person. How can hope be a person? We might ask. Because you've got people in your lives. And the reality is those people have let you down. As you encounter persons in your lives, you experience even the people that are closest to you and love you the most and that you've put most trust in. There are moments where they just don't live up to it. They don't fulfill all of what you think they could be. They let you down. So how could we possibly hope in a person when people just let us down? So then the question begins, well, who is this person that John is declaring that is hope shown up, made manifest among us? And so what does he say? Let's look at the passage. It says, in the beginning, en archen ho logos. In the beginning was the Word. Right there, John is taking us back. Everybody that would hear this would go, I know that. That's Genesis 1. In the beginning. En archen in the Greek Septuagint God began to create. In the beginning was the Word. God begins to create. It's this new creation story that John's introducing us to. And then he says, and the Word was. The Word was with God, and everything was created through God, through his Word. Who created the world? I will take God or the Word. Who created the world? Where does life come from? That's right. When you are seeking to experience life, is there any other place you can find it? Where does life come from? It comes from God, and it is only found in God. And so when we find ourselves in a place of needing life and rescue, where can we go? The answer is God. When we find ourselves in a place of needing life and rescue, where can we go? That's right. There is only one place. And John says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word already existed and was with God and was God, and through him all things were created. This is where life is found, and this life has shown up into the world. The word he uses, seems strange just that he would call him the Word, because we're like, wait, isn't Jesus the Son? And Jesus is also God. And okay, we've got this Trinitarian reality with the three persons that are one God. And this one person of the God, triune God, shows up, and he is declared as the Word. Now, the word in Greek, logos. In Greek, they had this understanding of word, or it was the reason, the defined reason, because most people couldn't read, so it wasn't like a word on a page that they would primarily have in their head, but it was the sense of like reason or understanding. But in the Jewish mindset, they had this understanding that the Word was actually God's Word given to his people. And so we have this story, the Torah, the law, and the prophets. And it is in that that is revealed to us how to be in relationship with God. Why do they need to be in relationship with God? Because that is where life comes from. And so the Jewish understanding, as they hear this idea of the Word showing up, is that this is God's revealed relationship and understanding of who he is, and then how we get to live in the life. This is where wisdom is found, the wisdom that leads to life, true life, even in a broken world, and God has given it to us. And so in the beginning, God creates, and then the humanity rejects God, and so God gives his Word, and he begins this rescuing plan. And so what John is saying is Jesus has showed up, and he is this revealed truth of who God is. He is the revealed way of what does it mean to live the way of life? What does it mean to live in relationship with God? Because it is only in relationship with God that we can find life once again. And so John says, in the beginning was the Word, and life and light came through him, and it shines in the darkness, and darkness will never overcome it. And so on your outlines it says, in Jesus there is light and life. And going back to the top, John tells this story, and he starts with this Genesis imagery. Why? Because when God shows up, when Jesus shows up, he's beginning a recreation story. And so the world has been broken, and there we live, and I don't have to explain this to us, we just look around, that we live in, and if you read Genesis 3 through 11, it is this story of God's good creation and God's humanity constantly leaning into and decreating itself, treating humanity like objects, creating humanity like obstacles that are in the way that we can just push away. And it is this decreation narrative that we take God's good creation, we abuse it and destroy it, and that's what's going on in the world, and we still experience that today, and so we know it. It is this decreation, this destructive and broken reality that sin brings into the world when we ignore God and push God away and say, I think I can do this myself. I can choose good and evil for myself. And we do a terrible job at it, and it brings destruction into the world. So John is saying this person, the Word, Jesus, has showed up to bring light and life, and he has showed up to bring new creation. That God did not abandon the world to this decreation reality that we are bringing into it, but he shows up to begin a new creation, John is saying, remember that story where God hovers over the earth and the chaos and the darkness, and then he begins to bring light, right? He speaks and there's light into the world, if you know it. And then he takes this chaotic, formless void and he brings order. And then he pulls life out of it. And John is saying, look what God is doing. He showed up into a broken world that is decreating itself, and he is bringing new creation. He's bringing light once again. He's bringing life once again. He is not just a person that we find hope in. He is God himself who enters into our world so that we would understand what it is to be in relationship with God again. Because we cannot have life outside of a relationship with God, because where does life come from? It's the same answer as before. I know. It feels like I'm getting tricky. I'm really not. It's Christmas. I know. We're tired. I'm not being tricky, because where is the only place that we can find life? Because where does life come from? That's right. And so God has to show up to give us life once again, and the way to live in life, which is why hope is a person. Because this person is God in flesh. And sarx, the Greek, shows up to make his home among us, to be with us. And he is recreating. He is bringing new life. He's taking what it is broken and restoring it so that we can live in this new life. And so we hope in this person, not just any person. We hope in this person. We hope in God. And we live in this world, and we want to place our hope in God. But the reality is our world is placing hope in all sorts of things, isn't it? Like I said at the beginning, in the stories, you could that's one of the reasons why I love to watch movies. You watch, where do they place their hope? Where are they seeking their salvation? And we do the same thing. We find ourselves in this place trying to find our own inner genius and to be successful and to chase money. And it's like, this is what's going to bring life. This is what's going to bring life. And even as followers of Jesus, it's so easy for us to look at the world and where everybody else is placing their hope or seeking to find meaning and purpose and go, that must be where meaning and purpose is. If I just pursue that, then I'll have meaning and purpose. But what we all know is it doesn't work. Because we've tried to live out of our heroic action, and this is who I really am. And underneath, there's this anxiety in us because we know it doesn't really hold water. It doesn't really. I mean, why is our world more anxious and freaked out than it ever has been? Because we're placing our hope in the most thin, unsettling realities. And we know, intuitively, we know that is not a firm foundation, and it is driving us crazy, but we do it. How do you know you've placed your hope in something that isn't Jesus? I know you're like, I'm in church. I've placed my hope in Jesus. I got it. But sometimes you find yourself in a place and you don't realize it. I don't realize it, but I do it. And so one of the ways I know that I've placed my hope in something other than Jesus is it starts technology. When my computer or piece of technology isn't working and I have to go in and fix it and I can't figure out how to fix it, it drives me insane. Why? Because I hope in technology too much. I like the latest gadget, and Apple just makes products that work, and I'm pretty sure Apple can solve my life. And so when Apple doesn't solve my life, I start to freak out and become unsettled. I also place my hope in my own intelligence. I want to be really smart. I do. And in that moment, what am I realizing? I'm not. I am not that smart. And none of you are surprised by that. But I'm not. And so but what is happening in me is the thing I have placed my hope in is falling away. It's not firm. And the truth is I have placed hope in there. When I am insulted by somebody that I love or feel like dismissed by somebody that is dear to me, a close relationship, if it's my wife, right? And it's like I feel ignored in that moment and my whole world just starts to fall apart. What do I realize? I've placed too much hope. Is placing love, trust in my wife a good thing? Yes, that is a good thing. But at some point when my world begins to fall apart, that's not where my ultimate hope has been. Same with technology. Is technology a bad thing? No. That's it. But when I place my ultimate hope in it and it doesn't stand up, my world begins to fall apart. When you place your hope in money or the markets or your job and something begins to hit it and you just begin anxious, anxieties goes through the roof, anger goes through the roof. This is the moment where I go, oh, where is actually my hope? Because it doesn't seem to be in Jesus in this moment. Because it doesn't seem to be in Jesus in the moment. This is how I can point out to myself that maybe I am hoping in something, really placing my hope in something other than the firm rock of Jesus, the only place that life is found. Because it doesn't work. And so we see, John says, into the world, God shows up in the person of Jesus. And he is bringing about new creation. He has brought light and life. And so when we find ourselves in this moment of anxiety, because all these things I have started to place my hope in are falling away, we look and we say, but God. See, in Jesus, God is made real. It isn't that God just said, hey, look, put your hope in me. Here are some good words. Like, read this and put my hope in me. No, God shows up in person to be near us and to be with us. On your outlines, God did not stay distant. God shows up in a person, in flesh, to be among us, to be with us. And it is the continuation of the story that's all throughout Scripture. That God, even after being rejected, even after humanity thinks, I can just be God, I don't need God in my life, he begins to send people and to begin and he gives us his word, and then he comes to a man, and then through a man a family, and then a nation, and then he's given the law to Moses, the way that we can live in relationship with God again. But over and over again in the story, the people that God says, hey, look, listen to this person, he'll show you how to be in relationship with me, that person eats it and falls short, and it all sort of crumbles. And as we engage God's law, we just think, I can't do it, we can't do it, it seems to fall apart. And so finally God shows up in person to provide a way for us. And this is the story. When we get to John, this is what's happening in the story. That God has been speaking and leading and trying to create this people, not just to bless them so that they would know what it is to be in relationship with God, but so that the whole world would know what it is to be in a relationship with God through him. This is the story of God's people, the nation of Israel. And so they're in this moment where God has spoken in the prophets, and they're in this moment of silence, and they're in this moment of anticipation. Yakal, or kavah, the sense of tension, where they look at the world around them and they need God to act. Where they're looking at a world that is in need and they go, God, show up. You've promised to act, God, act. And then that's where the story of Jesus begins, and that's why John writes, from the very beginning, in the beginning God created, and God was there, and Jesus was there, and this God shows up in the person of Jesus to be with us, among us, to give us meaning and purpose, to bring restoration and new creation into our lives. It is not an action from within me. It is not finding some sort of magical inner strength. It is experiencing and receiving the action from God, who is the one that created life to begin with, showing up to show us how to live, showing us up and to give us a way to find new life once again. It is about receiving it. And then we also learn about this person who Jesus is, that we place our hope in. That he shows up, he's the one that brings life and light. He's the one that's recreating and bringing new life into the world. And it also says he is full of unfailing love and faithfulness. That is, he is the one that is the God's loyal love, which is talked about all throughout Scriptures, the way he's described over and over again. God's loyal love, this covenant love, where God declares that he's going to do something and then does it. And so Jesus is this picture of God's promise made real. Into a world that was lost and waiting and hoping and waiting for God to show up, Jesus shows up, and he is full of unfailing love and faithfulness. It is solid and sustaining. Some of your translations say grace and truth. This is who Jesus is. Shows up full of grace and truth and shows up as a human. He becomes something, and doesn't become something like a butterfly becomes, caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Maybe more becomes something like a woman becomes a mother when they have a child. Right? Is a woman still a woman when they have a child? Yeah. And then are they a mother? Are they fully both? God becomes fully human and still is fully God. And he shows up as a person. And so he shows up as a person, which means, does God know pain? The answer is yes. The answer is going to be yes to all of them. Does God know pain? Does God know loss? Does God know the pain of rejection from a friend? God is not distant. He understands the world that we live in. He has experienced it. He knows what it is to be human. He takes on humanity. And so when we experience frustration, when we find ourselves in this moment where we feel like God is not around us or God doesn't understand and is distant, God is not. He is with us. It says that God shows up and he set up his dwelling place among us. He set up his tent, his skene, or Sukkot. He set up his dwelling place among us, to live among us, to be with us, so that we would never feel like we were alone. Because the story of Christmas is that God would not leave us alone. And so when we feel loss or we feel frustration, and this is why we can come to God with all of our anger, frustration, and sadness. Do you know that you can go to God with all of that? You know, in your anger, in your frustration, because you have experienced loss, you can go to, in fact, he welcomes you to go to him with your anger, as long as you go to Jesus with it. Why? Because any anger or frustration or confusion or questioning that you could come to Jesus with, he has already experienced it. Because when Jesus showed up and goes to the cross, he takes on all of the rejection of the world. He takes on all of the evil of the world, all of the hate and anger of the world. He's already taking it on, and he lets it destroy him so that it would not destroy us, because it would have destroyed us. And so he takes it on, and so he can handle it. He is present to you in this season, but also he has taken and destroyed the ultimate consequences of all of the sin and brokenness, and so we can come to him. We can go to him with all of it because he has already done it. He has taken on humanity to redeem humanity. What does that mean? This is the best I could come up with. And there's better. So just stay with me. I don't like Brussels sprouts. Anybody like Brussels sprouts? As a kid, okay, I'm with you people that liked Brussels sprouts, but let me just tell you my journey. So as a kid, my mom would feed us all sorts of healthy things, like all sorts of healthy things. Actually, would cook liver, chop up liver for us. I didn't even know it, but that's what I'm told. But would force salad down me. I mean, just all sorts of healthy things. Eventually, we would fight her. I'm one of 4 brothers, and so we would fight her on it, but, I could eat most of the stuff, broccoli, all that stuff. The one thing I could not ever get my head of, Brussels sprouts. Terrible. That was the one that was like in the napkin and to the dog, which the dog wouldn't even eat, so that becomes a sort of problem. This is the one thing I was like, Brussels sprouts are the worst thing in the world. And the Brussels sprout dish that my mom used to make, was this steamed Brussels sprout with maybe a little salt and pepper and some oil on it. I mean, that's all it was. So steamed Brussels sprouts, this was the dish. Here's the question. Does steamed salt and pepper and olive oil redeem Brussels sprouts? No, it does not. It is terrible. It is not enough. That Brussels sprout dish is terrible. What has happened in the last few years, when I go to a restaurant and I see Brussels sprouts on the menu, you know what I do? I order them. You know why? Because how do they make Brussels sprouts today? That's right. Am I equating Jesus with bacon right now? When you go to a restaurant today, they will grill them, put olive oil and vinegar on it, and let it get a little bit crispy, and then they will cook it with bacon. Is that a delicious dish? 100% it is a delicious dish. What has happened to the Brussels sprouts? Bacon has joined the Brussels sprouts dish and totally redeemed it. Bacon is delicious on its own. It does not need Brussels sprouts, but it becomes a Brussels sprouts dish and redeems it. I know. I did that. God takes on humanity to rescue it, to redeem it, to provide a way for us to have new life. This is the story of Christmas. This is why the person of Jesus is where our hope is, because this is what he has done for us. He has brought light into the darkness. He is bringing, there is only one place that life is found. Where has life come from? Thank you. He has brought life. Did you say bacon? I know, I'm never going to live that one down. He has brought life and light into the world, and he is bringing about new creation. It is not fully here, so we still experience the consequences of it. But he is bringing about new life and healing and redemption into our world, and that is only found in the person of Jesus. And so we look at our future, and it begins to be overwhelming and confusing because we don't know where it is. We look at the financial markets, and we don't understand it is. We can stand firm in Jesus because he has brought life. This is where our hope is found. And so 2 things for us this morning. Number 3 on your outlines. We are invited to be hope made real. First, we must receive hope. First, we must receive hope. We must grab hold of Jesus and experience Jesus in our lives through his Spirit, because he doesn't just leave, he sends his Spirit to be with us. And so God continues to dwell among us today. And so we must receive the work that Jesus has done on the cross for us. Say, yes, I do need outside action. God, I cannot do this myself. I do need you to show up to defeat the anger, the evil, the decreation realities within me and bring about new life. God, I need you to be my Lord and Savior. We must receive it and then live into generosity and forgiveness, because we have experienced generosity and forgiveness. And we look to the person of Jesus and see what does that mean to live that out. Because then as we follow in the way of Jesus, we live as people of hope. So we receive hope, and the second is we be hope. Is that the way I wrote it? We bring hope. See, after Jesus leaves and sends his Spirit to be with us, he gathers a people, and we are called, the church is called his body, which means what? So as you look at the world, where's the only place you can find hope? That's right. And specifically in the person of Jesus. And so as the world is looking for hope, where are they going to find it? In the person of Jesus, which is made manifest by his church, which is the body of Christ. And so in a very real way, maybe not perfect way, but in a very real way, the church is hope embodied to the world. Why? Because we live with generosity, forgiveness. We live with grace and truth. We live in the way of Jesus so they can experience and see what hope looks like. And so we are invited to be hope. See, hope isn't just some magical, distant reality that's sort of ethereal. It is actually a person, God made flesh, and now a people made flesh that point to the very God who is made flesh to dwell among us. And so we live, as we live into the world, we are the expression of God's hope in the world. Isn't that fantastic? And overwhelming? And maybe you have a little bit of doubts of this. I love the story, if you flip to the end of John's Gospel. It's a wonderful resurrection account. Jesus goes to the cross and is risen. And there's this whole recreation imagery. This is what God is doing. He's bringing this recreation imagery. And then there's the story of Thomas. Some of you know him as Doubting Thomas, right? Which we just kind of, it's like, oh, Thomas, right? Doubting Thomas. And I like his story. And we kind of give him a bad rap, because what does Thomas say? All the disciples have seen the risen Jesus, and they go, hey, we've seen him. He really is the one that we hoped for and promised for. And what does Thomas say? I'll believe it when I see it, right? But when I put my fingers in his side, when I see the holes in his hands, then I'll believe it. And we kind of give him a hard time about this. But here's the story that's going on in Thomas's head. See, Thomas knows the story of God's people. They know that there's been other leaders that have shown up that have promised to bring rescue and salvation before, and they failed. You have it all through the Old Testament, and then more recently in Thomas's head is the story of the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans that were supposed to be this great people that led them back into God's presence, but they really just sort of took power and money, and it didn't work out the way they want. And so when Thomas hears it, he goes, I don't know. We've placed our hope in others, and it hasn't worked out. I need to see it. I need to see it. And Jesus shows up and says, it's okay. I get that there's doubt, but here I am. And then Thomas says, this is the first time that Jesus is declared God by a person. The narrator declares Jesus as God. This is the first time somebody says it out loud in John's Gospel. He says, Lord and God, you are my Lord. You are my God. This is the moment where he goes, oh my gosh, salvation has finally come. Hope is really here. I can now live into this. And so then we get to not just receive it, but also be it. Christmas is this time, band can come out. Christmas is this time where we anticipate God's arrival. This is what Advent means. It's this sense of an anticipation that God would show up. That God would show up into the world, that he would act. And as we come into Christmas 2,000 years later, it's still the same, although God already has acted. And so we celebrate God showing up in person and being made manifest, and we're invited to live into that. But here's the other part of anticipation we get to live into for Christmas, that God would show up once again. Ultimately, when he returns, but in our everyday lives. See, to be people of hope is to look at the world and the people around us and anticipate God's work and action, because God's Spirit is at work and is acting. And so we get to live at looking at our neighbors and our friends going, God, how are you at work? We get to look at our own families and our kids and say, God, how are you at work? I want to live into this. I want to be the person of hope you've invited me to be. Would you stand with me as we continue to worship this morning? God, we are grateful for you. We are grateful that you did not stay distant, but that you came near. That you have given us opportunity to experience life in you. God, we want to be people of hope. God, as we worship this morning, would you receive it? Would you speak to us about your truth? Remind us of your presence this morning.